So we've built the structure for a simple web page, but let's face it, it's ugly. To make it more appealing, we can add some styling with CSS to make it look like this. Let's start by taking a quick look at how individual CSS properties are defined. We begin by specifying the property name, for example, color. We then add a colon followed by the value of the property, like red, and finally we finish the declaration with a semicolon. One way to apply this style to an element is to add a style attribute to it. This is known as an inline style. However, it isn't a very practical way of styling a web page. If we wanted to make every H1 element on the page look the same, we'd have to repeat this process for all of them. If later we decide that we want to change the style, we'd have to go through and update each one accordingly. To resolve this problem, we can move our styles into their own dedicated space. One way of doing this is to add a style element inside of the head element. At this point, however, if we added our color red property declaration, it wouldn't do anything. We need to let the browser know where to apply the style, which is done with the use of selectors. Selectors allow us to apply styles based on an element's tag, its ID, an attribute, or combination of any of these things. If we want to apply a style to all of the H1 elements, we can use the tag as the selector, followed by an opening and closing bracket. Our property declarations then go inside those curly brackets. Internal style sheets are an improvement over inline styles when it comes to maintenance and manageability, but if our website has multiple pages, we'll need to replicate this style element across all of those pages. Instead, we could store all of our styling in a separate CSS file and then tell the browser to include it. To do this, we add a link element inside the head, which needs two attributes, rel and href. The rel attribute determines the relationship of the link, which should be style sheet for CSS files. The href is the location of the file, which can be either a relative or absolute path. To include additional CSS files, we simply repeat this logic. But beware, browsers will apply styles in the same order in which they're found, so the order of your link tags is important. We're going to include a file called styles.css, the contents of which would look exactly the same as the content inside the style element we just created, but without the style tags. Let's start by changing the font style of the entire web page, which we can do by targeting the body tag. We'll set the font family, font size, and color properties. Size-based properties such as font size, width, and height, for example, support various units of measurement, the most common being either an absolute size in pixels or a relative size based on a percentage or multiplier. The EM unit of measure is more commonly used for font size and works by allowing a multiplier to be specified. The base measurement for that multiplier is taken from the nearest parent element that has an absolute font size, which is often the body. So, with the font size of the body set to 13 pixels, if we set all H1 elements to have a font size of 2em, the actual pixel size of those H1 elements would be 2 times 13 pixels. Next, we're going to center all of the content on the page. But rather than using a tag as the selector, we're going to create a CSS class. This will allow us to build styling for a specific purpose, defining any number of properties within the class and then using it across multiple elements regardless of their tag. The selector for a class starts with a dot, followed by the name of our choosing, and then the properties are defined in the same way as we've already seen. Before we add the next property, let's take a look into how an element is constructed. Every element is effectively a box with 4 sides. Inside that box, we can change where the content starts by adding some padding. On the outside, we can add a border, and beyond that, a margin, which creates empty space outside of the box. When working with these properties, we can target one or many sides. For example, we can provide a single value that is applied to all sides, 2 values which will apply to the top and bottom and then left and right, 4 individual values which are applied in a clockwise direction starting at the top, or by working with each side explicitly. So in our container class, we can add a margin property with the values 0 pixels and auto, which effectively sets an even margin on the left and right sides of the element, positioning it centrally. To apply that style to an element, we add a class attribute to it and specify the class name without that dot. So let's create a class that uses the text align property to position the text inside an element in the center. To add multiple classes to an element, we simply separate each class with a space. We'll style the input and button element shortly, but first, it's time for you to write some CSS. You can stay up to date with all of our content by subscribing to our YouTube channel or following us on social media. If you'd like a more interactive learning experience, then head over to websy.academy, where you'll find our full set of training courses complete with hands-on activities and much more.